Oh, the sheer, unadulterated panic of a finance bro, realizing he's actually just a nepo. Husband, I live for this. Preston spent years parading around Manhattan, acting like the Wolf of Wall Street, completely forgetting he was basically a kept man on an allowance. Men like him love to preach about independence and being alpha until that centurion card gets frozen. Vivienne didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask for couples therapy. She just hit the financial kill switch. Ladies, take notes. The fastest way to humble a narcissist isn't a screaming match. It's a cardboard box in the lobby and a revoked building pass. The harsh fluorescent light of the Aspen Resort bathroom reflected off the cold marble sink. I stood frozen, staring at the plastic stick trembling in my hand, 2 pink lines. I blinked, the edges of my vision blurring as a violent wave of vertigo hit me. The air in my lungs felt thick, heavy with the phantom scent of hospital antiseptic. Just a second ago, I was 40 years old, lying on a sterile bed, my body hollowed out by cancer and countless failed IVF cycles. I remembered the agonizing beep of the heart monitor. I remembered the way the door creaked open, revealing my husband, Preston. He hadn't come to hold my hand. He had come to sign the do not resuscitate order, and standing right behind him, trying to look sympathetic but failing to hide her smug smile, was a young woman with a swollen, pregnant belly. You see, Vivienne? Preston's voice from my previous life echoed in my skull, dripping with cruel indifference. It's not me. It's your barren body. I need an heir, and you can't give me one. A sharp knock on the bathroom door shattered the nightmare. Vivienne, are you going to be in there all day? We have that Black Diamond ski trail booked in 20 minutes. Let's go. Preston's voice, muffled through the heavy oak door, sounded impatient. I gasped, gripping the edge of the sink. I looked at the mirror. The face staring back at me wasn't the gaunt, dying woman of my past. It was my 28-year-old self, vibrant, alive. I had been reborn. God, or whatever twisted fate ruled the universe, had thrown me back to the exact moment my tragedy began. In my past life, when I discovered this miracle pregnancy, a near impossibility given my severe ovarian failure, he had cried tears of joy. I had run out to tell Preston, believing his previous claims that he was completely fine being child-free. He had reacted coldly, gaslighted me into continuing our grueling, extreme sports vacation itinerary, and exhausted my fragile body until I miscarried in a pool of my own blood. He had looked relieved when the doctor said, I'd likely never conceive again. It's for the best, he had whispered, holding me. I hate kids anyway. 12 years later, when he needed to secure his position in my father's empire, he suddenly changed his mind, forcing me into agonizing IVF treatments that ultimately destroyed my health, while he secretly built a family with someone else. I looked down at my flat stomach, my hand instinctively resting over it, not. This time, I vowed silently. This is my baby, the Kensington bloodline, and I will protect it with my life. Taking a deep breath, I shoved the pregnancy test into my pocket, smoothed down my cashmere sweater, and unlocked the door. Preston was lounging on the velvet sofa, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. Finally, did you pack the gear? We're going to be late. I'm not going skiing, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'm pregnant. I'm flying back to New York today. Preston's thumb froze on his screen. The silence in the luxurious suite was deafening. Slowly, he raised his head. I watched his face intently, catching the micro-expressions he thought he was hiding. There was no joy, no surprise, only a violent flash of panic, followed instantly by dark, unfiltered irritation. Pregnant, he repeated, his voice tight. He forced a stiff, unnatural chuckle. Viv, that's impossible. The doctors said your chances were practically zero. Life finds a way, I replied coolly, walking over to the closet and pulling out my sleek weekender bag. I began tossing my essentials into it. Preston stood up, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. A nervous habit. Okay, let's not overreact. Even if you are, we've been planning this Aspen trip for months. We can't just cancel. Let's hit the slopes today, and we can figure this situation out when we get back. Figure this situation out. Like my child was a logistical error, like he wanted me to exhaust myself on those treacherous slopes again. I said, I am going home. I zipped the bag shut, the metallic sound sharp like a gunshot. My body is fragile. I am keeping this baby, and I'm not taking any risks. His mask finally slipped. The charming, Ivy, League facade melted away, leaving the selfish, entitled narcissist I now knew him to be. Damn it, Vivienne, are you not listening? Preston snapped, his voice rising. I told you before we got married, I am child-free. I don't want kids. They ruin your freedom. They ruin your body, and they are a massive burden. We agreed on this. I stopped and turned to face him, my gaze so icy, it made him take a half step back. You agreed to be child-free. I tilted my head, studying him like a pathetic insect. If you were so committed to never having children, Preston, why didn't you ever take precautions? Why no condoms? Why no vasectomy? Preston's jaw dropped. He blinked, completely blindsided by the logic. You, he stammered, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. You were the one who couldn't get pregnant. Why would I need to do anything? So, you used my medical trauma as your personal convenience, I sneered, the disgust in my voice palpable. You didn't want to be child-free, Preston. You just wanted the billionaire lifestyle my father's money provides, without any responsibilities. You wanted me to be the broken one. You are being hysterical, he yelled, pointing a finger at me. Listen to me. We are going back to New York, and we are booking an appointment to get rid of it. We are going to continue our lives as they are. Do you understand? I let out a low, chilling laugh. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was the sound of an empire's doors slamming shut in his face. There is no anymore, Preston. I picked up my bag and slipped on my sunglasses. I am keeping my baby, and I am divorcing you. Preston froze, the color draining entirely from his face. Divorce over a clump of cells. You are insane. You can't just leave me here. Watch me, I said, my hand on the brass doorknob. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Just a heads up. I'd check your credit cards if I were you. Being child-free and single is about to get very expensive. I stepped out of the suite and let the heavy door click shut behind me, cutting off his frantic shouting. As I walked down the plush corridor of the resort, I pulled out my phone and dialed my wealth manager. It was time to cut the parasite off from the host. The private jet flight back to New York was the most peaceful 4 hours I had experienced in 2 lifetimes. Sitting in the plush leather seat, sipping sparkling water, I felt the heavy, suffocating fog of my past life finally lift. I was 28, wealthy beyond measure, and carrying the only heir the Kensington family would ever need. The moment the elevator doors opened directly into my Upper East Side penthouse, the real work began. Maria, I called out to my head housekeeper as I stepped into the foyer. Get the staff together. I want every single item belonging to Preston Caldwell packed up and removed from this apartment by sunset. Maria blinked, her eyes widening slightly, but her professional composure held. Of course, Miss Kensington. Should we use the Louis Vuitton trunks? No, I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. Use the cheapest cardboard boxes you can find. Leave them with the concierge in the lobby. And call security to revoke his building access immediately. Change the smart locks. For the next 3 hours, I sat on the terrace overlooking Central Park, enjoying the crisp city breeze while my staff systematically erased Preston's existence from my sanctuary. I watched them carry out his custom-tailored suits, his limited edition sneakers, and his absurdly expensive golf clubs, all bought with my father's money. While they worked, I made a single 2-minute phone call to my wealth manager. Cancel the supplementary Amex Centurion card under Preston Caldwell's name, I instructed. Freeze the joint checking account. Move all liquid assets into my private trust, effective immediately. By the time the sun dipped below the Manhattan skyline, my home was cleansed. I had visited my private OB-GYN, confirmed the pregnancy was viable and strong, and instructed my legal team to draft the divorce papers. All that was left was to wait for the parasite to realize he had been severed from the host. It took exactly 3 days. I was curled up on the sofa, reviewing a quarterly earnings report for my father's real estate firm, when my phone screen lit up. It was Preston. I let it ring 3 times before sliding the answer button. Vivienne, what the hell is going on? His voice was a frantic, high-pitched bark that echoed through the speaker. I just tried to swipe my keycard in the private elevator, and security told me I'm barred from the building, and my black card just declined at a Michelin-star restaurant. Are you out of your damn mind? Oh, the sheer, unadulterated panic of a finance bro, realizing he's actually just a nepo. Husband, I live for this. Preston spent years parading around Manhattan, acting like the Wolf of Wall Street, completely forgetting he was basically a kept man on an allowance. Men like him love to preach about independence and being alpha until that Centurion card gets frozen. Vivienne didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask for couples therapy. She just hit the financial kill switch. Ladies, take notes. The fastest way to humble a narcissist isn't a screaming match. It's a cardboard box in the lobby and a revoked building pass. I slowly turned a page of my report. I told you in Aspen, Preston. We are getting a divorce. Did you think I was joking? You can't do this, he roared, the panic bleeding through his faux alpha facade. My stuff is in the lobby in cardboard boxes. I'm an executive vice president, Vivienne. I can't be seen dragging boxes like some intern. You are an executive vice president because my father made a phone call, I reminded him, my voice dripping with icy precision. Without the Kensington name, you are just a bankrupt Caldwell with a bad temper. Come sign the divorce papers and take your garbage with you. You arrogant bitch, he spat, his breathing ragged. You think you can just throw me away over a clump of cells? Good luck being a divorced single mother. Let's see who wants you when you are dragging a kid around. I actually laughed out loud. The sheer audacity of his outdated, pathetic worldview was staggering. This is New York, Preston, not the 1800s. I am a billionaire heiress. My child will inherit an empire. You, on the other hand, don't even have a roof over your head tonight. Goodbye. I hung up and instantly blocked his number. The silence that followed lasted less than an hour before my phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID read Sylvia Caldwell, my mother-in-law. In my past life, Sylvia had been a master manipulator. Despite her family losing all their money decades ago, she still paraded around charity galas pretending to be old money, entirely funded by my generosity. When I couldn't get pregnant, she had subjected me to endless passive, aggressive remarks about my defective biology. I answered the call, putting her on speaker. "Vivienne, darling," Sylvia's voice oozed through the phone, a sickly, sweet, aristocratic drawl. "Preston just called me, absolutely distressed. What is this nonsense about a divorce? He's just a boy, Vivienne. He's immature, yais. But men take longer to grow up. You must be more forgiving." "He is 30 years old, Sylvia," I said flatly. "If I wanted to raise a boy, I wouldn't have married one. He told me he hates children and wants me to abort my baby. I am simply granting him the child-free, single life he desires." Sylvia gasped, the fake sweetness instantly evaporating. "You can't divorce him. Think of the child. A baby needs a father to be complete. You grew up with a father, didn't you?" "My father built a real estate empire," I countered sharply. "Preston can't even pay for his own dinner without my credit card. A useless man is worse than no man at all. I won't have my child raised around a parasite." "How dare you speak about my son that way?" Sylvia shrieked, her aristocratic mask shattering to reveal the desperate, grasping woman beneath. "This is all because of your pregnancy hormones. And knowing your luck, it'll probably just be a girl anyway. The Caldwells need a male heir." My eyes narrowed. The misogyny was so deeply ingrained in her, it was almost comical. "Well, you are in luck, Sylvia," I said, my tone lethally calm, "because this baby will have the Kensington last name. It will never be a Caldwell. You can tell your son to go find someone else to breed his precious male heir, assuming he can even afford a date right now." I ended the call, blocking her number as well. The physical and financial purge was complete, but I knew Preston. His fragile ego couldn't handle being dumped and left homeless. He would immediately seek validation from someone who looked up to him, someone he had power over. I picked up my iPad and opened a burner Instagram account I had created. I typed in the handle of Preston's ambitious, overly flirtatious subordinate, Harper Reed. In my past life, I had ignored Harper. She was basic, underqualified, and desperately trying to climb the corporate ladder. But right before I died, I learned she was the one who had kept Preston entertained during our marriage. I clicked on Harper's profile. A glowing purple ring indicated she had just posted a new story to her close friends list. A list my burner account had cleverly infiltrated months ago. I tapped the circle. The image was a dimly lit hotel room. 2 glasses of expensive champagne rested on a nightstand. And there, carelessly draped over the edge of the mattress, was a man's arm. I zoomed in. Wrapped around the wrist was the custom-engraved Patek Philippe watch I had bought Preston for his birthday last year. Beneath the photo, Harper had added a tiny smug caption: "Late-night strategy sessions with the boss. Some risks yield the best rewards." I stared at the screen, a dark, predatory smile spreading across my face. "Oh, Harper," he thought, taking a screenshot. "You have no idea what kind of risk you just took." I stared at the screenshot of Harper's close friend's Instagram story. The glow of my iPad illuminating the dark mahogany of my home office. That custom Patek Philippe watch wrapped around the man's wrist was undeniable proof. Preston was predictably pathetic. Cast out of his penthouse kingdom, he had immediately scurried into the arms of a subordinate who would stroke his bruised ego. In my past life, I would have cried. I would have felt the agonizing sting of betrayal. But now, sitting here with the knowledge of a lifetime, where this man had literally signed my death warrant, I felt nothing but cold, clinical satisfaction. Harper Reed wasn't a threat. She was a tool. To completely decimate Preston, a standard divorce wasn't enough. I needed to trigger the strict morals and compliance clause at his investment bank. Wall Street firms turned a blind eye to many things. But a vice president sleeping with his direct subordinate was a massive HR liability. If exposed, it meant immediate termination. And according to our ironclad prenuptial agreement, which Preston had arrogantly signed assuming he would never be the one to screw up, being fired for gross misconduct meant he walked away with zero alimony. Nothing but a blurry Instagram story wouldn't hold up in a boardroom. I needed to catch them red-handed, and to do that, I needed Harper to get sloppy. The next morning, I began the psychological warfare. I opened my official, verified Instagram account. I knew Harper stalked it daily from a fake burner profile. She was obsessed with the life she thought she could steal. I posted a carefully curated photo of a half-empty espresso cup sitting on my marble kitchen island. The rainy New York skyline blurred in the background. The caption was deliberately pathetic. Sometimes, the people you build a life with become strangers. Trying to find my peace in the silence today. It was entirely out of character for me. But it was exactly what a desperate, insecure mistress needed to see. I refreshed the analytics. Within 3 minutes, Harper's known burner account had viewed the stories. Swallow the hook. Harper rethought, taking a sip of my actual perfectly brewed coffee. Think I'm breaking. Over the next week, I fed the narrative. I ignored Preston's increasingly frantic emails, demanding access to his frozen funds, letting him stew in his financial impotence. Meanwhile, I posted vague, melancholic quotes about holding on to love. The bait worked flawlessly. Harper's ego inflated with every post I made. Believing she was winning the war for Preston's heart, she became recklessly emboldened on her own social media. 2 days later, my burner account caught her next update. It was a photo of a cheap, cramped apartment kitchen, undoubtedly the short-term rental Preston had been forced to lease. On the counter sat 2 plates of mediocre-looking pasta. Her caption read, "Home. Cooked meals for the hardest-working VP, I know. Real women know how to treat a man after a long day, no maids required." I let out a sharp laugh. No maids required. She thought she was insulting me, but all she was doing was documenting her own descent into domestic servitude for a man who couldn't even pay his own credit card bill. The timing was perfect. Our wedding anniversary was exactly 3 days away. It was time to spring the final trap. On the morning of our anniversary, I posted a photo to my main feed. It was a close-up of a blindingly brilliant diamond tennis bracelet resting on my wrist. It was actually a vintage piece my father had gifted me years ago, but the internet didn't need to know that. The caption was a masterclass in manipulation. "Thank you for the beautiful early anniversary surprise. Despite the bumps in the road, I can't wait for our romantic dinner tonight. Forgiveness is a journey." I hit post and waited. I knew Harper's psychology. She was a territorial creature. Seeing me flaunt a diamond bracelet and a promised romantic dinner would drive her insane with jealousy. Her fragile ego wouldn't allow Preston to spend his anniversary with his wife. She would demand he prove his loyalty to her tonight, at 4 p.m. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Preston. "Viv, I know we were supposed to talk tonight, but a massive deal just went south. I'm stuck at the office until midnight. I'm sorry, let's reschedule." A slow predatory smile spread across my face. He was so incredibly stupid. I typed back, my thumbs flying across the screen. "I understand. Work comes first. Don't work too hard." I tossed the phone onto my desk and immediately dialed my private investigator, a former intelligence officer who charged a small fortune and was worth every penny. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice crisp. "Do you have eyes on the target?" "Yes, Miss Kensington." his gruff voice came through the line. He just left the office building, but he isn't heading to his rental. He just picked up a young blonde woman from the corner of 5th and 42nd. They are heading uptown. Keep following them. Text me the address the moment they park. I hung up and made one more call. I dialed my cousin, Arthur Kensington, a formidable corporate litigator who looked more like a heavyweight boxer than a lawyer. Arthur, I said, are you and the boys free for a little field trip tonight? I need witnesses for a breach of contract. Send the location, Viv, Arthur replied, a dark amusement in his voice. We've been waiting to squash this bug for years. An hour later, I was sitting in the back of my chauffeured Maybach, wearing a razor-sharp black trench coat. Me phone lit up with a text from the investigator. The Plaza Hotel. Room 714. Preston had actually used his remaining cash to book a room at the Plaza to appease Harper. The irony was poetic. The car pulled up to the iconic hotel. Arthur and his younger brother were already waiting by the revolving doors, looking like a pair of high-end executioners in their bespoke suits. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We walked through the opulent lobby, our footsteps perfectly synchronized, radiating an aura of untouchable wealth that made the hotel staff step out of our way. We rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence. The hallway was quiet, lined with thick, sound, absorbing carpet. I stopped in front of the polished mahogany door of room 714. I could hear the faint sound of the television inside, masked by the low murmur of voices. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt the absolute, thrilling rush of impending victory. I looked at Arthur. He gave me a curt nod, stepping back to give me the floor. I raised my fist and pounded on the door. I pounded on the heavy mahogany door of room 714, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel in the quiet hallway. Inside, the muffled murmur of the television abruptly stopped. Footsteps padded across the carpet. Did you order room service? Preston's voice drifted through the wood, laced with a lazy post-coital arrogance. Just open it, babe, a woman's voice. Harper's replied, giggling. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Preston stood there, wearing a plush white hotel bathrobe loosely tied at his waist. His hair was ruffled, a smug smirk plastered across his face. But the moment his eyes locked onto mine, the smirk vanished. It was as if someone had injected ice water directly into his veins. His pupils dilated in sheer, unadulterated terror. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. Vivienne, he choked out, his voice cracking into a pathetic squeak. He instinctively tried to slam the door shut. He wasn't fast enough. Me cousin Arthur moved with the terrifying speed of an apex predator. He planted one massive, bespoke leather shoe against the door, easily overpowering Preston's frantic pushing. With a single effortless shove, Arthur forced the door wide open, sending Preston stumbling backward onto the carpet. I stepped into the room, the scent of cheap hotel champagne and stale perfume hitting my nose. "Hello, Preston," I said, my voice as smooth and cold as polished glass. "I see your massive deal required a change of venue." "Viv, wait, this isn't what it looks like." Preston scrambled to his feet, pulling his bathrobe tighter, his eyes darting frantically between me and my two imposing cousins. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "I can explain." "Oh, please don't," I sighed, waving a dismissive hand. "You were never very good at improvising." My gaze drifted past his trembling form to the king-sized bed. Harper Reed was sitting up, clutching the white duvet to her chest. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess. For a split second, She tried to maintain the smug, victorious glare she had practiced in her head. She thought she had won. She thought she was the prize. But as she looked at me, standing flawlessly composed in my trench coat, flanked by two men who looked ready to dismantle the room, her false bravado crumbled, her eyes widened, her lips parting in silent panic as the reality of her situation set in. "Harper Reed," I acknowledged her with a slight tilt of my head. "I must say, your Instagram photography skills are much better than your taste in men." Harper gasped, her face turning a violent shade of red. You follow my close friends." "I don't just follow it, Harper. I orchestrated it." I stepped further into the room, my heels clicking sharply against the floorboards. "Did you really think I was posting about forgiveness and diamond bracelets because I was crying over him? I needed you to feel threatened. I needed you to drag him to a hotel on our anniversary so I could get the time-stamped evidence." I watched the realization hit her. The horror dawning in her eyes was exquisite. She wasn't a mastermind who had stolen a billionaire's husband. She was a rat who had blindly followed a trail of cheese straight into a trap. "Vivienne, please. Let's just talk about this privately," Preston begged, his voice trembling. He reached out to touch my arm. Arthur stepped forward, his massive frame casting a dark shadow over Preston. "Touch her, and you'll be leaving this room through the window," Arthur growled. Preston snatched his hand back, as if he had been burned. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Okay, you caught me, fine." He tried to straighten his posture, attempting to salvage a shred of his fake Wall Street alpha persona. "We'll get a divorce. Me lawyers will contact yours. I am entitled to half of the marital assets, plus alimony, to maintain my standard of living. It is the law in New York." I stared at him for a long, silent moment. In my past life, this man had watched me die, calculating his inheritance while my heart stopped beating. No, he was standing in a hotel bathrobe, demanding my money. I reached into my designer bag and pulled out a sleek manila folder. I tossed it onto the glass coffee table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "You aren't getting a dime, Preston," I said softly. "You can't do that," he snapped, a flash of anger breaking through his fear. "The prenup guarantees a payout. The prenup guarantees a payout in the event of an amicable split," I corrected, tapping the folder with a manicured nail. "It also contains a very specific morality clause. Gross misconduct, infidelity, and public humiliation render your payout void. You leave with the lint in your pockets. An ironclad prenup with a morality clause is the ultimate girl's best friend. Better than diamonds." Honestly, Preston was so deeply marinated in his own audacity that he thought he could cheat on his billionaire wife with his basic subordinate and still walk away with half her empire. And let's take a moment of silence for Harper, the mistress who genuinely thought she was winning a prize. "Honey, you didn't steal a billionaire's husband. You inherited a broke soon-to-be unemployed liability. Vivienne weaponizing Wall Street HR policies instead of crying in divorce court is the kind of dark feminine energy we should all aspire to," Preston sneered, crossing his arms. "Good luck proving gross misconduct in court. A few photos of me in a hotel room won't hold up. I'll drag this out for years. I'll bleed you dry in legal fees." "I don't need a courtroom, Preston." I leaned in, me voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I just need your HR department." Preston froze. "Harper Reed is your direct subordinate," I continued, savoring every word. "Sleeping with her is a direct violation of your investment bank's strict anti-fraternization and compliance policies. I have time-stamped photos, hotel receipts, and Harper's very own Instagram confessions." I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen. "Right now, I have an email drafted to the CEO of your firm, the head of HR, and the board of directors. It contains all the evidence. If I press send, you aren't just fired, Preston. You are blacklisted from Wall Street forever. You lose your VP title, your unvested stock options, and your entire career. Preston's knees actually buckled. He stumbled back, hitting the edge of the bed. Number, he whispered, the air rushing out of his lungs. Vivienne, you wouldn't. That is my whole life. Your life was funded by my father, I reminded him coldly. And I am cutting the cord. I gestured to the manila folder. Inside is a zero alimony divorce settlement. You waive all rights to my assets, and you waive all parental rights to my unborn child. Sign it right now, and I delete the email. You get to keep your pathetic job refuse. And I press send. Preston looked at the folder as if it were a loaded gun. He looked at Harper, who was now weeping silently into the bedsheets. Realizing her own career was hanging by a thread, he looked at Arthur, who cracked his knuckles with a menacing smile, defeated, utterly and completely broken. Preston picked up the pen resting beside the folder. His hand shook so violently he could barely grip it. He flipped to the back page and scribbled his signature. He picked up the signed document, checking the ink perfect. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I said, turning my back on them. And Preston, don't bother going back to the office tomorrow. Preston's head snapped up, his eyes bloodshot. What? You said you wouldn't send the email if I signed. I won't. I paused at the door, glancing over my shoulder with a chilling smile. But my father's legal team is a different story. As I walked down the plush hotel hallway, leaving the wreckage of his life behind, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my father. Is the trash taken out, Vivienne? His deep, authoritative voice boomed through the speaker. Signed and sealed, Dad, I replied, stepping into the elevator. He's officially cut off. Excellent, my father chuckled, a dark, dangerous sound, because my lawyers just filed the lawsuit in federal court. He owes us $10 million from his family's bankruptcy bailout. The grace period is over. He's about to get a very special delivery. The elevator doors slid shut. The divorce was only the beginning. The real destruction was about to commence. The divorce was finalized with record speed. Preston's lawyer, realizing his client was entirely outmatched and financially castrated, advised him not to fight the zero alimony settlement. The moment the judge's ink dried on the decree, Preston Caldwell was erased from my life, legally and financially. I spent the next few months cocooned in the safety of my family's sprawling Hamptons estate, far away from the noise of Manhattan. Pregnancy, which had been fraught with terror and exhaustion in my past life, was now a serene, joyous journey. I ate well, rested, and watched my belly grow, feeling the strong, steady kicks of the Kensington air. But while I was building a future, my father was busy dismantling Preston's. The process server caught him at a Starbucks near Wall Street this morning. My father announced over breakfast one crisp autumn morning, casually buttering his toast. Served him the papers right in front of a line of junior analysts. I smiled over the rim of my decaf tea. How did he take it? Poorly, I imagine. My father chuckled, his eyes gleaming with ruthless satisfaction. The lawsuit demands the immediate repayment of the $10 million loan I extended to the Caldwell family during their bankruptcy 6 years ago, plus interest. In my past life, I had begged my father to forgive that debt out of love for Preston. I had believed Preston's lies that he was working hard to pay it back, when in reality he was using my money to buy luxury cars and fund his secret life. Now, the bill had come due. He doesn't have $10 million, Dad, I pointed out. He doesn't even have 10,000. That is precisely the point. Vivienne, my father replied smoothly. When he defaults, and he will, we freeze his accounts. We garnish his wages. We place a lien on whatever pathetic assets he has left. He will be legally restricted from high-level spending. No more luxury apartments, no more designer suits, no more fine dining. He will live exactly like the bankrupt fraud he is. And that was exactly what happened, through my private investigator. I received regular, highly entertaining updates on the rapid collapse of Preston Caldwell. After I secured the divorce papers, I had kept my word and refrained from sending the email to his HR department. However, the rumor mill on Wall Street was faster than the internet. Word leaked that Preston had been unceremoniously dumped by the Kensington family and was facing a massive lawsuit from my father. In the cutthroat world of investment banking, you are only as valuable as the capital you can access. Without the Kensington name backing him, Preston was useless. His firm quietly demoted him from his vice president role, stripping him of his unvested stock options and cutting his salary in half. They didn't fire him, they just marginalized him until he was nothing more than a glorified paper pusher. As for Harper Reed, the moment Preston lost his VP title and his access to my wealth, her true love evaporated. She had envisioned herself as the new lady of the penthouse. Instead, she found herself tied to a man drowning in debt, whose wages were being garnished by a billionaire's legal team. She complained endlessly on her Instagram burner accounts, whining about how Preston couldn't afford to take her to Nobu anymore, and how they were forced to move into a cramped studio apartment in Queens. It was a beautiful, poetic justice. They deserved each other. Months passed. The crisp autumn turned into a harsh winter, and then blossomed into a vibrant spring. On a bright morning in May, surrounded by the best medical team money could buy, I gave birth to a perfectly healthy, screaming baby girl. When the nurse placed her warm, tiny body on my chest, tears streamed down my face, not tears of sorrow or pain, like in my past life, but tears of absolute, overwhelming triumph. I looked down at her delicate features, her soft tuft of dark hair, and felt a fierce, protective love wash over me. "Hello, little one," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Welcome to the world." My parents stood by the bed, my father wiping his eyes, my mother beaming with joy. "What are you going to name her, Vivienne?" my mother asked softly. "Aurora," I said without hesitation. "Aurora Kensington. The dawn, a new beginning. And most importantly, not a drop of Caldwell in her name. On her birth certificate, the space for father was left completely blank. Legally, Preston did not exist to her. The years blurred together in a whirlwind of success and happiness. I didn't just inherit my father's real estate empire, he expanded it. I took the company global, opening luxury developments in London, Dubai, and Tokyo. He became a fixture on the Forbes list, known as a cold, calculating, and brilliant CEO. Aurora grew into a bright, fiercely independent little girl. She had private tutors, security details, and a life of unimaginable privilege, but I made sure she was grounded. She knew she was loved beyond measure. I rarely thought of Preston. He was a ghost from a past life, a minor inconvenience I had long since swatted away, until Aurora's 10th birthday. We were hosting a private celebration at our estate in the Hamptons. Caterers were setting up a massive tent. A string quartet was tuning their instruments, and Aurora was running across the lawn with her friends. I was standing on the terrace, reviewing a contract on my iPad, when my head of security, a towering ex-Navy SEAL named Marcus, approached me. "Miss Kensington," Marcus said, his voice low and serious. "We have a situation at the main gate." I didn't look up from my screen. "A paparazzi," confiscate their memory cards, and send them away. Not a photographer, ma'am, Marcus replied. It's a man. He claims to be Aurora's father. He's demanding to see her. My finger froze over the screen slowly. I lowered the iPad. A cold, familiar chill crawled up my spine. 10 years. It had been exactly 10 years in my past life. This was the exact timeline when Preston had suddenly changed his mind about being child-free. This was when he had realized he needed an heir to secure his legacy, forcing me into the IVF treatments that killed me. He hadn't changed. The timeline was playing out exactly as it had before. He wanted a child now. And since his current life was likely a miserable failure, he had come looking for the one he had discarded. I looked at Marcus, me eyes hardening into chips of ice. Bring the golf cart, Marcus, I said, my voice dangerous. I'll handle the trash myself. The wrought iron gates of the Kensington estate loomed like a fortress. As the electric golf cart glided silently down the long, oak-lined driveway, I could see him standing on the other side of the bars, Preston Caldwell. 10 years had not been kind to him. The arrogant, slicked, back Wall Street alpha I remembered was gone. His hairline was receding, his face looked haggard and deeply lined, and the suit he wore, while attempting to look professional, was clearly off, the rack and slightly frayed at the cuffs. The weight of my father's relentless debt collection had crushed the life out of him. He was pacing nervously, clutching a brightly wrapped, incredibly cheap-looking gift box. When he saw the cart approach, he stopped, his eyes widening. He tried to straighten his posture, plastering on a pathetic, hopeful smile. Marcus parked the cart a few feet from the gate. I didn't step out. I simply sat there, crossing my legs, looking at him as if he were a stray dog that had wandered onto my manicured lawn. Vivienne, Preston breathed, gripping the iron bars. My God, you look incredible. State your business, Preston, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You are trespassing on private property. His smile faltered slightly. I came to see my daughter. It's her 10th birthday today. I brought her a gift. He held up the sad little box. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Your daughter, you don't have a daughter. Aurora Kensington has no father listed on her birth certificate. You made it very clear 10 years ago that you wanted nothing to do with a clump of cells. Preston flinched, a flash of anger crossing his tired face before he quickly suppressed it. I was young, Vivienne. I was stupid and overwhelmed. But people change. I've grown. I realize now that family is the most important thing. I just want to be a part of her life. Family is the most important thing. The hypocrisy was so thick I could choke on it. I knew exactly why he was here. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a lifeline. He wanted access to the Kensington wealth through Aurora. He was likely drowning in his miserable life with Harper, realizing that his child-free stance had left him with no legacy and no one to care for him in his old age. People don't change. Preston, they just run out of options, I said coldly. And you are out of options. You waived all parental rights in the divorce settlement. You have zero legal claim to her. She has my blood. He raised his voice, gripping the bars tighter. You can't keep a child from her father forever. What happens when she starts asking questions? What happens when she wants to know who I am? She already knows who you are, I replied smoothly. Preston froze. She does. Yes, I lied, though it was a lie I planned to make true if he ever pushed the issue. I told her exactly who you are, a coward who abandoned her before she was even born, because he wanted to sleep with his secretary, a parasite who tried to steal her grandfather's money. Trust me, Preston, She has zero interest in meeting you. His face contorted in rage. You poisoned her against me. You vindictive bitch. Marcus stepped forward instantly, his hand resting on the taser at his belt. Step back from the gate, sir. Now. Preston took a hasty step back, glaring at me with raw hatred. You think you've won, Vivienne. You think you can just erase me. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them the great Vivienne Kensington is keeping a father from his child. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. Go ahead, call the press. Tell them you're a broke, disgraced former banker who cheated on his pregnant wife and defaulted on a $10 million loan. Tell them you're suddenly interested in your billionaire daughter after 10 years of silence. Let's see how the media spins that. Preston, my PR team will eat you alive. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He knew I was right. He had no leverage. He was a bug on the windshield of my empire. Take your cheap gift and leave, Preston, I ordered, gesturing to Marcus. If he ever shows up near my properties or my daughter's school again, don't call me. Call the police and have him arrested for stalking. Yes, ma'am, Marcus nodded. I signaled the driver to turn the cart around. As we drove back up the driveway, I heard Preston shout my name one last time, a pathetic, desperate sound that faded into the wind. I returned to the party, plastering a warm smile on my face, as Aurora ran up to hug me. I pushed Preston out of my mind. He was dealt with, or so I thought. A week later, I was in my Manhattan office when my private investigator, Mr. Vance, sent me a secure file. I still kept tabs on Preston, a habit born from the trauma of my past life. I needed to know what the rat was doing in the dark. I opened the file. It contained a series of photos and a brief report. Preston was still married to Harper Reed, but their life was a miserable, toxic war zone. Harper, nearing 40, had suddenly decided she wanted a child. She had been posting frantically on Instagram about fertility journeys and trying to conceive, but Preston, true to his selfish nature, was refusing. According to the report, he was telling Harper he was still child-free, while secretly trying to reconnect with Aurora to secure a ready-made, wealthy heir. But the most interesting part of the file wasn't Harper. It was the photos of Preston, leaving a cheap motel in the Bronx. And he wasn't alone. Hanging off his arm was a young, heavily made, up woman in her early 20s. I zoomed in on her face. My breath caught in my throat. It was Mia Dawson, the VIP receptionist from the private club. The woman who, in my past life, had stood over my deathbed with a pregnant belly, waiting for me to die so she could take my place. The timeline had accelerated. Preston hadn't just come looking for Aurora. He was already setting up his next parasitic host. He was cheating on Harper with Mia. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face. Preston wanted a child. Harper wanted a child. Mia Dawson was in the picture. It was time to blow their miserable little world wide open. I picked up my phone and dialed my investigator. Mr. Vance, I need you to procure 2 very specific medical documents. Zone regarding Preston Caldwell's fertility, and 1 regarding Mia Dawson's current extracurricular activities. The ultimate destruction was about to begin. Procuring the medical records was shockingly easy. When you had unlimited resources and a private investigator who knew how to navigate the grey areas of HIPAA regulations. Within 48 hours, 2 encrypted files sat on my secure server. The first was Preston Caldwell's fertility report from a discreet clinic in New Jersey. In my past life, he had blamed me for our inability to conceive naturally, forcing me into agonizing IVF. He had been so arrogant, so convinced of his own virility, that he refused to get tested until it was almost too late. The report confirmed what I already knew. Preston suffered from severe, irreversible oligospermia. His sperm count was practically non-existent. The doctor's notes explicitly stated that natural conception was statistically impossible, and even IVF would require a miracle. Preston was firing blanks. He had always been firing blanks. The second file was a dossier on Mia Dawson. The young, ambitious VIP receptionist was exactly as I remembered her. A ruthless social climber looking for a shortcut. She had latched onto Preston, likely believing his lies that he was a misunderstood Wall Street executive temporarily down on his luck. But Mia was hedging her bets. The investigator's photos showed her frequently sneaking into the apartment of her ex-boyfriend, a heavily tattooed bartender named Leo. And according to a recent pharmacy receipt, Mia had just purchased prenatal vitamins. She was pregnant, and given Preston's medical reality, there was a 0% chance the child was his. She was planning to trap him with the bartender's baby. I leaned back in my leather executive chair, steepling my fingers. The board was set, the pieces were in place. All I had to do was light the match and watch them burn each other to the ground. I didn't need to confront Preston. I didn't need to speak to Mia. I needed the most volatile, desperate element in this equation to do the dirty work for me. I needed Harper. Harper's Instagram had become a tragic diary of a woman, realizing she had traded her youth for a nightmare. She was nearing 40, desperate for a child, and trapped in a loveless marriage with a broke, aging man who refused to give her one. Her fertility journey posts were full of passive, aggressive quotes about unsupportive partners. I created a new, untraceable Proton Mail account. I attached the PDF of Preston's severe infertility diagnosis. Then, I attached the high-resolution photos of Preston and Mia, leaving the Bronx motel, followed by the photos of Mia passionately kissing her bartender ex-boyfriend. In the body of the email, I typed a single, devastating sentence. He isn't refusing to give you a child, Harper. He physically can't. But he's perfectly willing to let his new mistress pretend he can. I hit send. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. 3 days later, my investigator sent me a video file. He had been tailing Preston, waiting for the inevitable explosion. The video was shot from across the street of the cramped Queens apartment complex, where Preston and Harper lived. It was dusk. The camera zoomed in on the second-floor window. Through the cheap blinds, I could see the silhouettes of Preston and Harper. It wasn't an argument. It was a massacre. Harper was screaming, her voice shrill enough to bleed through the thin glass. She was waving a stack of printed papers, my email attachments. Preston was backing away, his hands raised defensively, looking like a cornered rat. Suddenly, the apartment door flew open. Harper stormed out onto the exterior walkway, dragging Preston by the collar of his cheap shirt. "You sterile piece of garbage," Harper shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet courtyard. Neighbors were already opening their doors, pulling out their phones to record. 10 years. I wasted 10 years of my life serving you, begging you for a baby. And you told me it was my fault. You told me I was too stressed. Harper, keep your voice down. Preston hissed, frantically trying to pull her back inside. People are looking. Let them look, she screamed, slapping him hard across the face. The sound cracked like a whip. You've been screwing a 22-year-old receptionist, and the best part, she's pregnant. You really think you're the father? You pathetic, infertile loser. Preston froze, his hand pressed against his red cheek. Pregnant? What are you talking about? Harper laughed, a manic, unhinged sound. She threw the printed photos of Mia and the bartender right into Preston's face. The papers fluttered to the ground like morbid confetti. She's playing you, Preston, just like you played me. She's having her bartender boyfriend's baby, and she's going to make you pay for it. Oh, wait. You can't pay for it, because Vivienne took all your money. Preston stared at the photos on the ground. The reality of his absolute humiliation washed over him. He wasn't the alpha male. He wasn't the master manipulator. He was a sterile, broke joke being played by a girl half his age. He lunged at Harper, his face twisted in pure animalistic rage. "Shut up! Shut up!" He shoved her hard against the railing. Harper screamed, clawing at his face. That was when the police sirens started wailing in the distance. The neighbors had called 911. I paused the video, a cold, satisfied smile touching my lips. Preston Caldwell was finally getting exactly what he deserved. But I wasn't finished. I wanted to make sure he never ever crawled out of the hole he had dug for himself. I picked up my phone and called my father's lead attorney. "Arthur," I said, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. "Remember that $10 million debt Preston owes us? The one we've been slowly garnishing?" "Hard to forget, Vive," Arthur chuckled. "What about it?" "I have reason to believe Mr. Caldwell has been hiding assets to avoid payment." I lied smoothly. "I want you to file an emergency injunction for a full forensic audit of his finances. And Arthur, tip off the IRS. I'm sure they'd love to see how he's been filing his taxes since he lost his VP title." "Consider it done," Arthur said, the predatory anticipation clear in his voice. Preston's personal life had just exploded. No, it was time to drop the nuclear bomb on his freedom. The forensic audit hit Preston Caldwell like a freight train. When you are a desperate man drowning in debt, you make stupid mistakes. Arthur's legal team, working in tandem with the IRS, tore through Preston's pathetic finances like wolves through a carcass. They discovered that in his desperate attempt to maintain his facade of wealth for Mia Dawson, Preston had been committing wire fraud and embezzling small amounts from the mid-level accounting firm. He had managed to scrounge a job at after Wall Street blacklisted him. It wasn't a massive amount, maybe $100,000, but it was enough to trigger federal charges. The final act of Preston Caldwell's miserable life played out exactly 2 weeks after his explosive public fight with Harper. I didn't watch it through a private investigator's lens this time. I watched it on the evening news. I was sitting in the back of my chauffeured Rolls Royce, heading toward JFK Airport. Aurora was sitting next to me, excitedly looking through a travel guide for Paris. The soft, ambient lighting of the car illuminated the built-in television screen mounted behind the partition. The local news anchor's voice cut through the quiet hum of the engine. "Breaking news out of Queens this evening. Former Wall Street executive Preston Caldwell was taken into custody today by federal agents on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." I tapped the volume button on the armrest. The screen cut to raw footage outside the Queen's apartment complex. It was a circus. Federal agents in windbreakers were hauling boxes of documents out of the building. And then, there he was. Preston emerged from the building, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. He looked completely broken. His hair was a greasy mess, his face pale and sunken. He was wearing a cheap, wrinkled T-shirt. The arrogant, entitled man who had once stood in an Aspen resort and demanded I abort my child was gone. In his place was a pathetic, terrified criminal. As the agents marched him toward the waiting SUV, a woman burst through the crowd of onlookers. It was Mia Dawson. Her pregnant belly was just starting to show. "Preston!" she screamed, her voice a mix of panic and fury. "Preston, you bastard! What about the rent?" You promised me a condo in Manhattan. Preston stopped, turning his head to look at her. The cameras zoomed in on his face. The absolute disgust and hatred in his eyes were palpable. He knew the truth now. He knew she was carrying another man's child. He knew she was just another parasite, exactly like him. "It is not my kid, you lying whore," Preston screamed back, his voice cracking hysterically. "Go find your bartender!" Karma didn't just knock on Preston's door. It drove a bulldozer right through his living room. The supreme irony here is delicious. For years, he gaslit Vivienne, blaming her body, acting like his DNA was God's gift to humanity. To find out he was firing blanks the whole time. And his new 22-year-old gold digger was just using him as a wallet for her bartender's baby. That is a Michelin star serving of poetic justice. It's the ultimate ego death for a man whose entire personality was built on toxic masculinity. Mia's face contorted, realizing her meal ticket was officially going to prison. She didn't cry. She simply spat at his feet, turned on her heel, and shoved her way back through the crowd. Harper wasn't there. According to my investigator, she had packed her bags the night of their fight and moved back to Ohio to live with her parents, her dreams of being a wealthy New York socialite dead and buried. The agents shoved Preston into the back of the SUV, the door slammed shut, sealing his fate. Facing federal charges, massive corporate debt, and zero assets to pay for a decent lawyer. Preston was looking at a minimum of 10 to 15 years in federal prison, and when he got out, he would be a destitute, aging felon with a $10 million judgment still hanging over his head. He was utterly, completely ruined. "Mom." Aurora's voice pulled me away from the screen. I turned to my daughter. She was looking at me with her bright, intelligent eyes, holding up the Paris guidebook. "Do you think we'll have time to visit the Louvre on the first day? Or should we go to the boutique on Avenue Montaigne first?" she asked. I looked at the television screen one last time. The news had moved on to the weather forecast. The ghost of my past life was finally exorcised. The nightmare was over. I reached out and gently smoothed a lock of hair behind Aurora's ear. "We have all the time in the world, my love." I smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached my eyes. "We can do whatever we want. The world belongs to us." I pressed the button on the armrest, turning off the television. The Rolls-Royce glided onto the expressway, leaving the dirt and noise of the city behind. I leaned back against the plush leather, closing my eyes. I had been reborn. I had rewritten my destiny. I had protected my child, expanded an empire, and watched the monster who killed me destroy himself. I was Vivienne Kensington, and my life was absolutely perfect. You know, reading Vivienne's story really hit a nerve for me. It perfectly encapsulates a very specific, very dangerous type of man that prowls around successful women. Preston wasn't just a cheater, he was a chameleon. He mirrored Vivienne's desires when it suited him, played the child-free by choice card to avoid responsibility, and then ruthlessly demanded an heir the second his legacy was on the line. I've seen this script so many times. Men who attach themselves to powerful, capable women, not to build an empire together, but to comfortably reside in the one she already built. They drain your energy, your youth, and your resources, all while convincing you that you're the lucky one. But what Vivienne did brilliantly, and what I want every single woman watching this to internalize, is that she recognized her own leverage. She didn't let nostalgia or societal pressure keep her chained to a sinking ship. She understood that her money, her power, and her peace were her own. The moment you stop treating a parasitic partner like a project to be fixed, and start treating them like a bad investment to be liquidated. Your whole life changes. Vivienne didn't just survive. She thrived because she finally let the trash take itself out. And then she called the IRS to make sure the garbage truck crushed it. I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever dealt with a Preston, a guy who wore your success like it was his own custom, tailored jacket, only to shrink the moment the funds dried up? Or maybe you've had to enforce a brutal boundary to protect your own peace. Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's spill the tea, validate each other, and remind ourselves why we never settle for less than we bring to the table. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with that one bestie who needs a reminder to check her prenup. Until next time, stay smart, stay elegant, and protect your peace. Bye, loves.